Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the hearing to order and acknowledge we're in Treaty 1 territory and the home and the traditional lands of the Ojibwe, the Cree, the Dakota people, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake Forty First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Ron Merritt. I'll be your chairperson this afternoon. Introducing the panel members is Miss Valerie Warhan and Mr. Richard Woodred. A recording secretary is Fran Piccolotto. And representing the city of Winnipeg from the assessment department is Mr. Ken Wong. To the Zoom participants at the hearing, please note that you will be placed in the waiting room until the property is called upon. Once it is your turn, you will be admitted to the meeting. Kindly follow along the City of Winnipeg Board of Revision YouTube channel for the hearing process. Once the host has admitted you to the hearing, please close or mute your YouTube player. You will then be permitted to speak on respect to the property once your hearing is concluded, and then you may leave. This afternoon, we'll be hearing an application for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested is described in each application and will limit discussions to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anybody speaking in these matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence by market value by the Board of Revision. The board is appointed annually by City Council and it is independent along with the city administration. We make a decision based on the evidence provided at this hearing and issue a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision in respect to application may be appealed to the municipal board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information how to do so will be included in the board's order. In respect to the properties or the hearing, this process will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. It'll be then the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have. Then it'll be the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each party will have the each side will have the opportunities to summarize if they wish. Once the evidence about the application is brought forward, the applicant may leave. This process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. We will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. This afternoon, we are hearing just one item, number 3 on our docket. So I'll ask our secretary to affirm the assessor and to swear in the applicant.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Ken Wong.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Ms. Applicant, please state your full name.
Susan Sapanik.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
All right. I think everybody is familiar with the routine. So we'll first hear from the assessment department. Mr. Wong, your evidence for the first property, number 32 Ardent Avenue, whenever you're ready.
Okay. The subject property is 32 Arden Avenue. The file number is 24-521. The roll number is 080-040-17500. It's a residential apartment block that's 2 stories high. It was built in 1969, but we have an effective year built of 1985. There's 23 suites with 23 outdoor parking stalls. On page 2 is the sales history of the subject property. The subject property sold in March of 2019 for $2,875,000. On page 3 is the location of the subject property with a picture of the subject property. On page 4 is our income valuation. We use average rents of $1,008 to get a potential income of $278,000. We used a 3.6% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $268,000. And we used a 45% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $145,000. Capped at 4.6%, we have an estimated market value of $3,168,000. On page 5 are some rent comparables showing that the rents that we've applied are in line with the market. On page 6 is a summary of the income and expenses submitted by the property owner. See, we didn't have any information for 2020, but we had information for 2021 and 2022. To try to estimate the operating income for the property, I used the income from 2022 at $260,000 and average expenses from 2021 to 2022 at $149,000, giving a net operating income of $110,000. Capped at 4.6%, the estimated market value is $2,401,000. But as noted, the $2,401,000 is not a very good estimate of market value, as the subject property sold for $2.875 million in 2019, and that's 4 years earlier than the reference date for the 2025 cycle, which is April 1st, 2023. So to get a better estimate of the market value of the property, I used their 2022 income of $260,000. And I used the model expenses at 45.66% to get a estimated net operating income of $141,000. Capped at 4.6%, the estimated market value is $3,077,000. And so I feel that this is a more reasonable estimate of market value as compared to the 2.4 million above. So I'd like to recommend that the value be revised to $3,077,000 as is written on my page 1. On page 7 is information on how we derived our cap rates. And on page 8 are some cap rate sales that substantiate the cap rates that the model is applied. On page 10, and the rest of my brief is the income and expenses submitted by the property owner. So in summary, I said their actual NOI results in what I feel is a poor estimate of market value, whereas the adjusted net operating income results in a more reasonable estimate of market value. So the adjusted value, once again, is $3,077,000, and I feel that's in line with the 2019 sale of $2,875,000. Having said that, I ask that you accept the revised value of $3,077,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Questions of the assessor?
Yes. Mr. Wong, at page 5 of your written submission, you've set out some comparables there, and that was where you arrived at your average monthly rent of $108.05.
Yes.
Do you know whether or not 28, comparable to 28 Arden has been renovated?
I am not 100, no, I do not know.
Okay, what about comparable number 3? The same question. Do you know if that one's been renovated?
I am not sure.
And then comparable number 4, do you know if that one's been renovated?
You can have the same answer for all the comparables.
Okay, so if I put to you that they are being advertised as renovated suites, you'd have nothing to dispute that.
No.
Would you agree that renovated suites generally rent for more than unrenovated suites?
I would say so.
And you'd agree that the average monthly rent for the subject property in reality is $931 a month, not $1,008 a month?
That that would appear to be a reasonable statement, and I guess the numbers that we presented, they may not totally line up with the subject property, and it's probably unlikely that they will ever sort of line up perfectly. But I guess when I reviewed this, I kind of looked at the overall estimate of value, and I felt that the overall estimate value might have been a little bit high. So I adjusted the value, and the revised value that I'm suggesting of $3,077,000. I feel that even though the numbers don't exactly line up to the subject property, that the final estimate of value is in line with what it sold for in 2019. So like I said, even though the numbers don't totally line up, I feel that the value estimate is, in my view, reasonable.
Do you agree that the evidence of what one property sold for is not necessarily conclusive as to what market value is?
Yes.
So there are times that a buyer may overpay for a property, is that correct?
I have potentially seen that before, and you know, if maybe one person overpaid, then that might be you can consider that. But as far as I can tell, there seems to be a decent number of people overpaying, and if a decent number of people are overpaying, then that I guess maybe in my view is kind of the is the market. So I'm just sort of taking the current sale price of the property at face value, and like I said, typically the market is, from what I've seen, it's sort of gone up, and that's kind of the only direction that it's gone over the past 15 years. So I feel that the estimated value is reasonable, even if yeah, it seems like the sale price for this property is not, it doesn't seem out of the ordinary to me.
Even, and that's just so that I understand you. So even giving the income level that this property has with its expense level, your view is that the what the property sold for is not reflected, or is reflective of what this property's net income is with the cap rate applied.
Yeah, yeah, I feel so, and I feel that the value and the sale price is, I feel you can give some weight to it. You may not totally rely on it, and if there was other properties that had maybe of similar condition and age that had sold for significantly less, I could definitely give consideration to that as well.
But you agree that income-producing properties such as apartment buildings are typically valued as income-producing properties, not as comparative to sale prices, correct?
Well, I would say like when you're trying to value a property, you look at the information that's available. And if that information includes, say, some comparable sales, it's just sort of reconciliation. You can come up with a value using the income approach, but you probably want to reconcile your income value with maybe comparable sales, or reconcile it with something else so that you can sort of like I said, reconcile your value and have confidence that the income value that you've calculated is a fair market value. And so I believe that when you're trying to value something, you can look at comparables as to potentially reconcile what your income approach might be.
But you haven't done a comparable for sales for this property. You've just provided one sales amount.
Yes.
And then on page 6 of your submission, I'm going to go down to the second box, where you've got income of 260,000 and change. And then you have indicated that you've just averaged the expenses for 2001 and 2021, pardon me, and 2022. Is that correct?
For that middle chart, yes.
Okay. What was your methodology for just averaging the 2 years?
Just to sort of try to stabilize the property a little bit by averaging those two numbers.
So,
yeah.
You didn't look at the individual items that make up those expenses to determine whether or not that
No.
was all right. And even after averaging, you then in your bottom chart on that same page reduce the expenses even more and significantly more.
Yes, like I said, like on the bottom of the middle chart, you can see that I didn't feel that the estimated income value of 2,400,000 was a reasonable estimate of market value, because as considering that the property sold for 2,875,000 in 2019, and that's 4 years prior to the reference date, and typically the market has gone up from 2019 to 2023. And so I felt a more reasonable estimate of value was on the bottom chart, where I utilized their actual income of 260,000, and I used a sort of more market expenses as what the models applied at 40. The model applied a 45.66% expense ratio. So using the model expense ratio, I estimated the net operating income to be 141,000, and capitalizing it at 4.6% resulted in a value of 3,077,000, which is the value that I'm recommending that it be revised to, as it seems to be a little bit more in line with what the actual property sold for in 2019.
But the model, as I understand it, has a range, correct?
Yeah.
And that range varies from 34.83% to 69.74%. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the medium is 48.41%?
I'm not sure. I will take your word for it.
Okay. And yet, in your third chart there, at the bottom chart, you used 45.66, which is below the median.
Okay. Yep. Yes.
Okay. Do you have anything you can identify as to why this property should be below the median?
As far as I can tell, I just felt that using the 45% was reasonable, as the resulting value was in line with what it might have sold for, and so that's I would say, the main reason for doing it. Because like I said, in the end, we're trying to get a reasonable estimate of market value, and I'm giving some weight to the sale price of the subject property, and so that's the reason why that was my approach for coming up with a reasonable estimate of value.
I'm going to suggest to you that you just took the purchase price in 2019 and manipulated the numbers to get to where you wanted them to be. Is that correct?
You can suggest that. But I will say that it appears that this estimate of value is in line with what it sold for in 2019. So I guess maybe in my view that appears reasonable.
Those are my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Warhan, questions of the assessor?
Some were answered, thank you, but I'd like to know how he came up, or assessor, how did you come up with your cap rate of 4.60%?
It's based off of primarily the age and location of the building, and that is the cap rate that the model assigned for the subject property, and it's, I would say, primarily based off of age and location.
So if you're basing it on age, one thing, and location, would the cap rate, if you look at the model, would the cap rate not be a little bit higher? Because you've taken the lowest, lower than what the low is on the multifamily.
Yeah, the range. Sorry, I guess also taken into consideration with regards to the cap rate is the size of the building. As far as I can tell, the model has assigned lower cap rates to smaller buildings. I would say, I don't know, I would be estimating properties that are smaller, such as this, where there's 23 properties or 10 properties, or maybe, or units, sorry. There's 23 units in this one. I would consider this a little bit on the smaller end of the scale. And as far as I can tell, the smaller buildings typically have a lower cap rate. And this one, it falls in the sort of lowest 20th percentile, just below the 4.75% indicated in our charts. But I would say a lot of the smaller apartment buildings are garnering or a lower cap rate. So definitely on the lower end, because this is me sort of guessing, but it just sort of seems like the smaller units are a little bit more attainable by a larger market of buyers. And so it seems to be fairly competitive. And it is based off of the sales information that we have, it's indicating that those smaller buildings do have lower cap rates. So the fact that this one is at 4.6%, it doesn't seem out of line, and especially considering that when you look at the resulting estimate of value, whether it be 3.1 million or $3 million, the resulting value seems to be a fairly accurate estimate of market value, considering the property sold for 2.8 million in 2019.
Okay, thank you for the answer. Thank you so much.
That was it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Whitbread?
Yes. Mr. Wong, did you visit the property?
I have not inspected the property.
Do you know what condition it's in? Do you have any information?
It appears to have been renovated back in 2008 or 9. But outside of that, I'm not sure of the. I can't really give my opinion of the condition of the property. I guess would be sort of assuming that it is just a normal apartment building in terms of condition.
I can ask the applicant after.
Yeah.
Do you know what led to the improvement in the effective date? Roughly 25 years. Any building permits, anything in your knowledge or information?
We do have some notes indicating that it was a quote unquote totally renovated, and it appears to have been done in 2008 or 2009.
That's all you got, okay?
Yeah.
Would you agree that typical capitalization rates for good quality properties in the age range of 1980 to 1988, or 98, sorry, are in the neighborhood of 5.25%? Typically, by virtue of the guides that we are provided.
Yeah. Based off of some of the sales that I've seen, typically the smaller apartment buildings are probably lower. I would say more in the 4 to 4.75% range. And we do have some cap rates that are even lower than that. And I think typically those cap rates are with buildings that are on the smaller side, whether it be 6 or 10 units or maybe 15 units. It seems like the smaller the building, the lower the cap rates typically are. So that's in my experience, that's kind of what I've seen in terms of cap rates.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Wong, this is the walk-up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the total number of units are 23.
Yes.
And parking is for 23 units also.
That's what we have on record, yes.
Okay. And there was a sale in March of 2019 for $2,875,000. Did you verify the sale or anything like that?
We looked into the sale, and as far as we can tell, it was an arm's length sale.
In your cap rate, the subject property was sold at that time, and the cap rate was developed at 5.02. And the city is using a cap rate of 4.60.
Sorry, the 5.02 cap rate that you're referring to, what is that?
I'm not sure exactly. It's I think it was in your cap rate study or in somebody's study that I don't have it right handy, but I remember going through all.
Sorry, I'm just going to try and help here. If you look at page 8 of your submission.
Yeah. Actually, I see it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now with the lower cap rate that you're using,
yeah,
it gives you a higher value to the subject property.
Yes. Keep in mind that I guess the property sold in 2019, and so the data in 2019, the cap rates are a little bit higher in 2019 as compared to the reference date for the 2025 assessment. The 2025 assessment has a reference date of April 1st, 2023, and that's 4 years after the sale of 32 Arden. And so it actually seems to fall in line that the cap rates have gone down a bit since from 2019 to 2023. So it actually kind of seems to be in line, but yeah, it seems to fit. But the cap rate that was calculated there, the model doesn't really sort of take one particular sale. It sort of takes all the sales and then it works out what it thinks is an appropriate cap rate for the subject property. But in this particular case, it being 5.02 in 2019, it actually seems to be in line with the 4.6 in 2023.
So when you crunch all the numbers from your original, you came up with a 3,168,000. Now you're coming in at $100,000 lower.
Correct.
For buildings of this age, the model spits out a number in regards for expenses, does it not?
Yes, it does.
So that's what you're using on this particular property?
Yes, if you look on my page 6, the expenses that I use to estimate the value of $3,077,000, it utilizes a 45.66% expense ratio, and it's the same expense ratio as the model used in the initial value.
And you haven't seen this property, I think Mr. Whitbread had.
Yeah, I have not inspected the property.
Yeah. So, all right, I thank you. We're ready. Did you have a further question?
Could I ask one more question?
Yes,
Just-
yes.
It arises out of a question that you provided. When the original estimate of or value was 3,168,000, it was that percentage of 45.66 was applied to a higher effective income than what is shown at page 6 of your expense summary.
Correct.
And so the actual effective the actual expenses allowance dollar-wise,
Yeah.
when the assessment calculation was 3,168,000 was 122,463. Is that correct?
Yep.
So that's higher than the 118,000 shown in that last table on page 6.
Yeah, that would be correct. And it's basically it's to reflect the lower income that was used, because the income that I utilized was 260,000, whereas in the model's original, it was 278,000. So that's where the difference is.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Sapanic, we're ready for your presentation.
All right. So the property consists of a 2.5-story walk-up residential apartment building, and it contains 23 suites. The building structure is concrete and steel with brick, stucco, and wood exterior cladding. The property has a financial year end of December 31st. So had the property sold in April 23, April 1st, 2023, the reference date, the expenses and income for the 2022 calendar year would have been the basis for market value. And it's my submission that for multifamily rental properties like this, the income approach is the preferable approach for determining market value as at the reference date. So I'm going to go through the cap rate selection for this property. In its overview of the mass appraisal model, the city of Winnipeg indicated a range of 3.5% to 7.95% for multifamily, and they indicated the 20th and 80th percentiles were 4.75 to 5.45. I've provided for you at Exhibit A to my submission, which is, let me get to that page. Page 5 the cap rate survey for the first quarter of 2023 from Cushman Wakefield, and you'll see that on low-rise apartments for the city of Winnipeg, they've indicated cap rates ranging from 5% to 5.75. And then at the next page, Exhibit B, you have the same report from Colliers, which indicate for multifamily low res, it's 5 to 6%. And it's my submission that given the ranges indicated by the city of Winnipeg and these two reports, a cap rate of 5% is appropriate. This building is not renovated since probably in around the range indicated. It wasn't renovated by the current property owner, and it wasn't renovated recently when it was purchased. So, and this is a 3-story walk-up. It's not a high-rise building. Yeah, I did reflect the fact that this is in the St. Vitale area of the city of Winnipeg. That is where my cap rate of 5% was chosen. In terms of the vacancy and collection loss, I've used the one by the city. The subject property did have sort of some lower vacancy in that 2022, 2023 vicinity. But with it being a very small building, you know, 1 or 2 units can make a huge percentage change. So I have used the model of 3%. 3.6%. And then I've set out for you at page 2 of my submission, in the middle there, the actual income for the property. So we have a gross potential suite income of $257,005.68. You should note this building is rent controlled, which means that unless the landlord spends more money and undertakes either renovations under rehabilitation or has some extraordinary expenses that can justify the rent cannot be raised except to the extent of the maximum set by the province, and the province set a 0% rent increase for 2022 and for 2023. So the property did have income as well for parking stalls and other miscellaneous income. One thing I will also point out on that on this property is that in terms of the residential suite income, it actually went down in 2022 from 2021. The residential rental income was $250,991 in 2021, and then it okay, yeah, that was net of vacancy. So there can be slight adjustments to the rents when it's rent controlled. If a staff member makes an error rounding up a rent, for example, the RTV will come back and reduce it to that amount. So there is a slight, I just wanted to point that out in case there was any question on the rent sort of not being 100% the same for the 2 years. And then going to the bottom of page 2 and carrying on to page 3, I've submitted detailed calculations of, or detailed, not calculations, detailed amounts of what was actually spent in 2021 and 2022, and then did a stabilized amount in the third column of that table for each of those expenses. So as you can see, insurance has gone up significantly for this property. And it's my submission that we don't expect those numbers to come down anytime soon. Not saying insurance never goes down, but at this point, I'm indicating the 2022 actual should be used. The property management fee is just a 5% of EGI. And again, because, different vacancy rates were applied, the effective gross income is after vacancy. And since this property had slightly lower vacancy, using the 3.6, the 5% ends up at that figure in that third column. For professional fees, again, I've used the 2022, the 2022 figure, actual. And again, those, we don't expect those to go down. Our accounting fees, there's nothing to indicate those should go down. On office supplies, I've used the average. On advertising, I've used the average. On hydro, I've used the average. On water and sewer, I've used the average because again, sometimes billing can happen where 1 year and the other, there's a little bit of overlap. The heat, ventilation, air conditioning, I've used the average. Waste and snow removal, I've used the average. I'm not sure if you recall, but 2021 was an abnormally low year for snow, whereas 2022, when we had snow banks that were higher than my height and even my husband's height, who's taller than me, it was quite a bit higher. So again, I've used the average to stabilize that. I've used the average for security, though I could argue that we are experiencing higher costs for security across all of our properties. And maybe that one shouldn't have been averaged, but I did use the average. For repair and maintenance, again, I've used the average, and I would just show you there that the 2 years are almost identical, and this is the figures for this are not above normal for what you would expect on a per suite level. So then the caretaker expense, I've used the average as well. Only again, I could argue that I should have used 2022's figures because wages tend to go up and they don't tend to come down. Maintenance supply, I've used the average. The internet and telephone, I've used the average though, the 22 actual, which was actually lower than 2021. And the property taxes, I used 22 actual, which is actually, again, lower than 2021. So with that, I get a stabilized amount for expenses for this building of $159,828, which is just slightly lower than the actuals for 2022. And then carrying on towards the bottom of page 3 of my submission, using the actual income from this property, applying the city's vacancy, adding the other income being parking and other miscellaneous fees. The actual gross effective income for this property is $258,318, deducting the stabilized operating expenses that I've just gone over. We've got a net operating income of $98,491, and applying the 5% cap rate gives you a rounded value of $1,970,000. Subject to any questions, that is my submission.
I thank you. Mr. Wong, questions of the applicant?
Yes. Did the current owners pay $2,875,000 for the property in
Yes,
2019?
yes,
Okay. And you were saying they overpaid?
yes.
Okay.
Based on the how this property operates, yes, they did.
Okay. And do you know what they based their purchase price on? Was it an appraisal or?
It was not an appraisal.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of what. This property was bought with two other properties that were commonly owned by a vendor. So I don't know how much was just it being a bulk, looking at it and whether or not the value was put more on one building versus another. I couldn't speak to that. But based on how this property actually performs, they overpaid.
Okay. And did you look at anything else in terms of market information to, well, I guess regarding your value of 1,970,000, were you able to, I guess, reconcile that value against anything else in the market to sort of indicate that it might be a reasonable estimate?
The only way I reconciled it is to apply a cap rate that is reflective of what is reported by both Colliers and oh, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank, Cushman Wakefield.
Yeah.
And looking at the performance and whether or not the expenses that this property actually incurs seem to be reasonable in relation to in relation to what properties generally cost to maintain.
Okay, that's all my questions.
And thank you. Ms. Warhon, questions?
I have none, thank you.
Okay, I thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
I have none, thank you.
Okay. I just have a couple questions. I guess, who suggested, I guess, that you appeal the assessment? The owners? Or yourself?
The owners,
The owners?
yes, but to be clear, I'm an employee of the parent company of the owners, of the owner of the company. So it is our organization.
So are you the property manager for a lot of buildings?
I'm not, I don't work directly with the property manager, but yes, we have a number of buildings in our portfolio.
So your
My job is
experience-
not property manager.
So your experience is a depth in regards to apartment buildings.
Correct.
Did you see the sale at the time back in 2019 that had the cap rate of 5%? And this is, I think this is where you're coming from. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your question.
Okay, there's a cap rate associated with the sale in 2019, right?
Yes,
And it's 5%.
yes.
So there's other data to take into consideration, but you're giving a lot of your weight for your presentation at the 5% cap rate that was back in 2019.
No, I'm using the 5% on the basis of the cap rates, mainly the ones that are disclosed in Schedule A and Schedule B of which is cap rates that were reported by those two real estate firms for the first quarter of 2023.
So in your experience, these type of apartments, walk-ups, small numbers, 20, 25 suites, do their expenses run percentage-wise? What do they run at?
I haven't sat down and done a full calculation in my office, but I have seen anywhere in the range of sort of 55 to in the 63, maybe 64%. And that's just going by sort of somewhat memory.
And the city is coming in at the 45, and you're at, I think 62.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of variation depending on the building that is very peculiar to a building. So I can give an example of a property that we have on River that has a quite a bit larger security cost because we require more regular security patrols of the property because of its location and some of the things that are happening at that property. Some buildings are more energy efficient than other buildings. So you might find that heating costs at a particular building is lower. So it's more about it being sort of in a range as opposed to being a specific percentage.
So your evaluation is considerably lower than the city's, about $1 million.
Yes.
All right, I thank you.
Would I be able to just ask one more question, please?
Yeah,
Yeah. I guess I was looking at the net operating income that you've calculated at the net operating income is 98,491.
Mm-hmm.
If you applied that NOI against let's say the sale price of the property at 2,875,000, that number works out to about 3.42% in terms of a cap rate. Does that sound about right to you?
I don't believe that was the net operating income as presented by the vendors.
Okay. But in this particular case, if you took their actual net operating income, that it would be 3.42%. That sounds reasonable or accurate.
I'm sorry, I'm not quite following your question.
Yeah. If you applied your net operating income of 98,491 against the sale price of 2,875,000, does 3.42% cap rate sound right?
I would have to do the math, but I think the issue here is that I'm not saying the net operating income was 98,000 in 2018, late 2018 or early 2019, when this building was contracted for, in terms of what was presented when this building was bought.
Okay. That's all my questions.
okay. Just a little follow-up, Mr. Wong. It's exactly what the applicant had said, because you're dealing with different incomes. You have income for the sale in 2019 compared to the evaluation of 2023. So I don't think that's a really fair question.
Okay, that's fair for, I guess, yeah, you to say that. Yeah.
Does you wish summary, Mr. Wong?
I guess just to say that the revised value that I propose is, it appears to be a reasonable estimate of market value, and especially considering what it sold for in 2019. So I ask that you accept the revised value of $3,077,000.
I thank you, sir. Mr. Stepanek, final word?
Well, I respectfully disagree with the assessor. I think the actual income and expenses of this property with appropriate cap rate applied is the proper way to calculate the market value of this property.
All right, I thank you very much for appearing, and I thank you for your presentations and results very soon. So thank you, you're free to go, and have a pleasant day. Mr. Wong, thank you very kindly, and you're free to go also.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
Have a good day.
Have a good day, everybody.
We've heard all the items scheduled, and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you, have a great day.
Yep, you too. Bye.